For the long-awaited annual general. In the Nova Scotia Public Prosecution Service, and always a shout out to the strong public servants. We have Nola Lambros Firebird. So close. So close. Yeah, try to do it, but not phonetically. So Nola is a partner with HBA Chartered Professional Accountant, also on the Superfund Audit and Risk Committee. And have I missed anyone on our board? Oh, it's the lovely Jamie. Come on down. This is Jamie O'Neill, our board chair, who's here just after I finished introducing the board. Totally good timing for you. We do have some board members who aren't here with us tonight. We have Margot Cameron. People may know David Booth from Halifax Police. We also have Rose Landry and Kathy Gillis here as well. So long-standing board members. So with that, I would also like to add a big welcome to all of the Shelter Nova Scotia employees and their guests. And I know there are going to be some people receiving some service recognition awards later, so really welcome. Jamie, you're really able to come up anytime now. I recognize one representative from the Department of Community Services for Barrie. Legally go out to the back, Barrie Schmidl, but I think there may be some others watching online. So hello, DCF peeps. I want to have a special warm welcome to Catherine and Laura Woodman for the founders of Jones Table, and they're here as well, strong supporters all over Nova Scotia. We have some representatives from SP Dumoresque Architects. We have representatives from the Church of All Saints. We have representatives from the North Pine Foundation. We have representatives from the family of Robert Staples. And of course, we have lots of representatives here and online from our partner community organizations doing such good work. So I'm going to make a motion to approve the agenda for today's AGM. If someone will second it, Chelsea, that's great. And then I'm going to sit down and Jamie can take over.
I was going to say, you're doing such a wonderful job. Are you sure? All right. I do apologize for being late. I'd first like to start off. I know that you were introduced to the board. I am Shelter Nova Scotia's board chair, Jamie O'Neill. Are you hot or is it spotlights up here or hot flash? Okay, good enough. All right. I'd first like to start off by introducing Steve Warren. So Steve is a supporter of Shelter Nova Scotia, and he's a donor and impacts our culture. One of our core competencies within Shelter Nova Scotia is gratitude. Over about 6 years, Steve has facilitated and grounded our gratitude training. First, he taught us to understand. Then he deepened us with our gratitude practices. His work with us continues. Today, on World Gratitude Day, we are fortunate to have Steve here to ground us as we move forward into this meeting. So please welcome Steve Foreman.
Here for folks online. It's World Gratitude Day, and gratitude is one of 16 core competencies at Shelter Nova Scotia. And there's two things I think we all know. When we think of homelessness in our province, in our city, in our communities, we've come a long way. And we also know we have a long way to go. And you know that more than me. You know, one of the things is, it is so easy to get caught up in all the barriers, the challenges, the obstacles, all the things that get us to that momentous place. And the thing is, when that happens, and I'm not saying ignore the challenges that are before us, that are before you, that are before the people that you serve. But when that becomes our dominant mindset, always, don't you find it's easy to become disconnected, frustrated, overwhelmed, just heavy? So I'd argue that this is when we need to be in a place of gratitude and have a mindset to be able to solve the problem, to be able to get to that momentous solution, the place where we want to go. And how do you get to these places? How do you make big steps? Teeny steps, right? We make little steps. And each and every little step adds up to a big momentous step. And that little step, it could be just, we just booked a meeting with somebody. I had a coworker cover for me. Like, these are little steps along the way, right? and they're important to celebrate. And I mean, it's nice to celebrate the great big steps. The big, but they're oftentimes they can be few and far between, can't they? So it's important for us to think and step back and look at what are the little steps that we've had. And so here, let's do an exercise. You and you, we're going to do an exercise together. Think of a little step, a little victory that happened in the last 7 days. Not one of yours, Jamie, maybe someone else on the board, but someone else who is working towards solving the problem of homelessness in our communities. Can you, I need hands up when, I can't ask you, hands up when you got one. I need hands up when you think of a little step that a colleague or somebody else, they could be in this room, or they could be online, they could be at work right now. Give me your hands up when you think of a little step. My arm is only so strong. We got one. I need everyone. Everyone. We want everyone. My arm stays up till every arm in this room rises. Just pick your arm up to placate me. Come on, Laura. No, I mean, you got to think of something. Okay, we got something. And you know who this person is? Oh, my arm's getting tired. Yeah. Okay. We're going to send a little ripple out into the world. I want you to get your phone out. And I want you to send that person a text. And I want you to honor them and celebrate their little win. Celebrate their step that they took. Help them understand how it connects to the overall goal of eliminating homelessness. And express your gratitude for it. It's pretty simple, isn't it? And I want you to do it with no strings attached. And we'll talk about that in a second. So let's send those texts right now. It could be someone here, could be, but you can send it to anyone you want, wherever you're thinking of. I'm going to send a little ripple out into the world to express our gratitude for little steps. Catherine's still typing up there. I suggested that we do this with no strings attached. Whoever you sent it to, I don't know, if you're like me, you probably have this somehow desire to get a thank you back from the person, don't you? I don't know, I do. But you know what? If that's the case, I'm not expressing my gratitude. I'm doing it for some other reason that I want to be. So this is this no strings attached. If someone thanks you back or says something to you, great. But that doesn't have to be the case. So we'll do it no strings attached. We're just expressing gratitude for taking a step on World Gratitude Day in the direction of solving this problem that you spend each of your days working to solve. Jamie, we're going to give it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. Really appreciate that. World Gratitude Day. Here, I was just in a session all day with clients, and we were talking about how every day there is an appreciation for one thing or another. So Our gratitude is that we have 365 days in which we can be appreciative for. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming. I would like to move now into the approval of the June 2021 annual general meeting minutes. If there are any changes, questions, amendments, please advise. Okay, hearing none. If there are no corrections, the minutes are approved as written. I'd like to now move into my annual chair's report. Can't I do both? No, I actually don't need a second for that, do I? I don't think I do. But anyways, we'll take one. It's like paddles, right? Like, bids. No, not so much. Okay. All right. I'd like to move into the chair's report. Everybody should have a copy of the written report that I have submitted for this year. Just want to draw upon some of the key highlights that was mentioned. I think probably one of the quotes that I have used predominantly this year, over the last couple of years, is something that Winston Churchill once said, and that is, never let a good crisis go to waste, because boys, we can learn so many things. And I think that truth can be said here within Shelter, Nova Scotia. We've seen a lot of changes through COVID. And I know that as we near the end, or what we hope to be the end of COVID is in sight, many things were accomplished through COVID. And it wasn't an easy road all the way through, but it was definitely something that we are very happy to have achieved, and some changes that were made that are substantial to not only the organization, but to the employees, and most especially to our clients. So within this crisis, one of the key initiatives that was performed by the board this year was the creation of a new 3-year strategic plan. And in my notes, and I'll just read verbatim here some of the key concepts around it. We've been working off of our strategic plan for a number of years, and we thought it necessary to really set the course for the next few years going forward. And with things changing at such a rapid pace in society today, we felt it best to keep it to a 3-year strategic plan. And with that, within that creation of the strategic plan, is amending our vision. Our vision now reads, we are a community without judgment, with spaces and places for people to belong. We felt that was truly representative of who we are as an organization. And the word judgment is something that is extremely important to us within Shelter Nova Scotia. It's something that we value deeply. We also updated our mission statement. And our mission statement was to provide a place to stay and services to promote stability for marginalized individuals. If anything, the need for our services has increased trifold, doublefold, you name it. It's gone up not only within Shelter Nova Scotia, but within our community as a whole, as we all are faced with the affordable housing crisis. So you might be a privileged individual saying, oh, look, my house just went up $400,000 in value. On one side, that's great. But on the other side, many of us are now out of the zone of which we can afford a home. So for those of our clients that we currently serve that were already experiencing hardships in finding an affordable, good place to live, the crisis has exasperated that even further. So we are very cognizant of this issue. It is definitely a focus for us going forward. That has started the creation of our housing hub, which started out to be a bit of a pilot, and it has been extremely successful. I don't think I can say extremely enough. It overexceeded all of our expectations, and it really drove home the need for that type of support within our system. Based on the number of people that are attending, that are coming in and seeking our help, it really spoke to us that there is a gap, and there is more that we can do to help within our community. So with that, I would like to personally thank, first and foremost, our employees. Without you, it's just not, oh, I'm just going to thank you and that's it. From the bottom of my heart, from the bottom of the hearts of everybody here on the board, the work that you do, we can't thank you enough. It's extremely hard work, and I can imagine sometimes feeling a bit frustrated, things may be going slower than you had hoped, maybe not achieving the goal that you had set out. This is a very difficult environment, and we thank each and every one of you for your active participation and for coming into work each and every day and helping our clients. I'd also like to thank my fellow board members for laughing at my jokes at board meetings, although it doesn't happen very often, but the couple of times that you have laughed, I do appreciate it. To our donors, we wouldn't be here without you. We heavily depend upon your support, your encouragement, and your funding and financing as well. I think it's extremely important. It's going all to a very good cause. And please know that we are being very respectful and with the money that we do receive, and mindful of best purpose and use for those funds. And lastly, to our fearless leader, Linda Wilson, although she's sitting kind of over there in the corner. She never does like the spotlight, do you? No, okay. Anyways, someone that you can count on, someone that is, texting you back at 11 o'clock at night, providing you with the information that you need. Just a constant. And I think that, when we think about an effective leader, having that consistent, calm, reassuring voice is what Linda brings to this organization, along with a wealth of knowledge. So I thank you, Linda, and everyone. So I do appreciate the ability and your confidence to be here as your chair for Shelter Nova Scotia, and we're very much looking forward to another excellent year ahead. With that, I have so many different agendas in front of me. Linda was going to give me another one, and I'm like, I can't have another one because I'm really going to get messed up here right now. But the board has 3 separate committees, and I now like to call upon each committee chair to provide their report. So starting with Chelsea, for she is our, I'm not going to break into a song, for she is the chair of our Finance, Audit, and Risk Committee. We're going to be talking about the statements, audited statements, and committee updates. So Chelsea, I'll hand it over to you. Yep, I have it here that Chelsea to introduce auditors. Okay. I just do what I'm told.
Thanks, Jamie. So for everyone that hasn't met me before, or I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Chelsea King. I'm the treasurer of the board and the chair of the audit, finance, and risk for our committee for short. So we have the privilege of having Laura Taylor here from Lyle Tilly Davidson. So Laura is the manager of the audit team who completed the audit just a few weeks ago. So I'll start by thanking you and your entire team for all of the work that went into this year's audit, and I'll pass the mic over to you until I come back afterwards.
All right, thanks, Chelsea. So good afternoon, everyone. My name's Laura Taylor. So I'm a CPA and manager at Lyle Tilly Davidson. Tara Spur, the audit partner, could not make it tonight, so she sends her regrets. So I'm here to give you guys a very brief overview of the audited financial statement. I know sometimes you start talking about numbers and your eyes glaze over, so I'll try to keep it very high level for you. So I guess the first thing, I believe in your package, you received the financial statements. If you want to follow along, flip the pages, that's up to you. So the first piece is the audit report. So Shelter Nova Scotia was issued a standard audit report, which includes a qualification for the completeness of fundraising and donation revenue. That's standard really in the charity and not-for-profit world. So really it becomes a standard audit report that was issued for shelter. So next, we're going to flip over to the statement of financial position, which in the for-profit world would be the balance sheet. You might be more familiar with that term. So looking at the assets, they've overall increased approximately 350,000 compared to the prior year. Part of that is a cash increase, a net cash increase of 170,000. So that's really related to 241,000 of project funding received and deferred for next year, less about 80,000 of internally restricted cash that was spent on occupancy costs during the year. Next is the receivables line. So that decreased about 70,000 compared to priors. Again, that's kind of related to just timing of when funding is received. So nothing major to note there. There was a public service body rebate received, which is what's bringing down that balance. And then capital asset has increased 216,000. So of course that's net. Lots of work, repairs, maintenance was capitalized during the year. Purchases of 358,000. And then of course that's net of amortization. So recognizing the use of those assets over time brings us to a 216,000 increase. So moving on to the liability side, they have increased approximately 480,000 from the prior year. So accounts payable is up about 67,000. So again, that's timing related to when vendors are paid. Deferred revenue is up 340,000. So there's some funding received from GW Murphy as well as from North Pine that will be used next year to fulfill some projects. Deferred capital contributions, so that kind of is married with the capital asset balance. So that's funding that was received to fund those capital projects has increased. And of course, we're recognizing over time the asset use, which is bringing that balance down and being recognized to revenue. So overall, net assets have decreased as the result of 130,000 deficit for 2022. So then if you want to flip the page over to the income statement piece or the revenues and expenditures statement. So revenues have increased net approximately 50,000. So 235,000 increase in Department of Community Service funding, which is obviously the needs have increased in the last few years. So funding has increased kind of to match that. Fundraising and donations have decreased 171,000 compared to the prior year. But really, when you look historically over 5 years, that number is quite far up from where it was historically. And then, of course, there's those pieces of revenue that was received that's deferred to be spent next year. AHAN's funding was increased as well. So there was some funding for the Herring Cove apartments that was used this year. And then other grant revenue, you can see there's kind of a fluctuation there of about 70,000. So really in 2021, there was a lot of one-time emergency COVID grants. So that's kind of why you're seeing that variance there. And then looking at the expense side, so those have increased as well in line, about 587,000 from last year. 322,000 of this is related to salaries and wages. So getting that cost of living increase for staff positions. 80,000 is program cost increased. Of course, you need to support client needs, so there's costs associated with that. 103,000 subcontracts increase. So 902 Man Up helped out by providing some shifts at Berry House. So that's kind of was an unusual item, which is why it's down under the subcontractor expense. 80,000 increase in occupancy. So during the year, a new lease was signed for Kemp Road for kind of the administrative component. That is all related to the restricted cash piece. So there's some funds set aside to help fund that premises. Supplies decreased from the prior year. So of course, with the pandemic in 2021, lots of funding was spent on supplies and there was a little bit left over of those supplies. So not as much needed to be spent in 2022. And then the other income expenditures, those are kind of the non-cash items, recognizing capital asset amortization, which gets us to the end result of a deficit of 130,000. So overall, shelter has a sound financial position. There were no significant issues noted with the audit. The audit team was great, working with Chelsea, working with Sean and Linda. They were able to provide all of the information we needed. And I guess, does anyone have any questions now that I've gone through that you'd like to ask? All right, that's what I expected. So if anyone does have any questions, as you're, staying up late at night reading through those statements, just let me know and I'd like to get you an answer. Thank you so much. So now I'll invite Chelsea back up to give her report.
Super exciting stuff, eh? So thank you, Laura, for your report and for your detailed review. Hopefully that'll cut down some of my time as well. I also want to thank the audit team. I want to thank the finance staff, all of the finance staff that were involved in the preparation of the audited financial statements this year. I know there was a lot of work that went into it, so we're very appreciative of that. The board of directors met virtually on Thursday of last week, September 15th, to approve the audited financial statements, and this motion was carried. So the statements are approved as they are in your package. There was some discussion during the meeting around the deficit that's being reported for the year, which Laura already kind of went through the ins and outs of that, but the main factors there are that there were some unbudgeted and unfunded program costs during the year, causing that deficit to occur, as well as higher than anticipated maintenance costs. Those would be kind of the main factors playing in there. Like Laura sort of mentioned, some of the categories of expenses that were higher this year when comparing to last year would be the rent, utilities, and food expenses. These all increased over prior year, and the main reason for that is due to the new central office space on Kempt Road, causing obviously more rent expense, more utilities expense, and etc. Household supplies and fundraising costs were two areas where we actually saw a decrease in costs this year. The main reason for the decrease in household supplies was because last year, with COVID being a huge factor, there were additional costs related to cleaning and other household supplies. And as you would see on the statement of the income statement, fundraising revenues did go down this year, so the associated costs decreased as well. I guess I won't go through the balance sheet in detail because Laura already did that, but if you want to take a read through my treasurer's report, it is included in the package and would go through some of the specific lines. One of the main things being, I guess, capital assets have increased due to a number of projects that took place during the year, which are kind of the main ones are listed in there. So things like the Snugs renovations, HVAC installations, new windows, roofs, things like that. Also the showers and laundry facilities that were added to the hub, and some improvements for the new office space. The drop in receivables that Laura mentioned is primarily due to the fact that there was an HST audit during the year, which has been fully completed and all related balances have been settled, so that cash came in the door that had been sitting in that receivables line for a while, which caused a decrease there. Our long-term debt has been refinanced recently, so it's refinanced for another 5 years, and all of the scheduled repayments were made during the year. The last thing I'll mention is the internally restricted fund that was set up last year that you would see at the bottom of the statement of financial position. Last year, we had set up an internally restricted fund of $430,000 to internally allocate these funds towards the new office space. So we have drawn down on that by about $75,000 during the year to put towards those increased costs such as rent and utilities. Overall, net assets remains healthy at about $1.9 million. And that's sort of all I had. So assuming there's no questions, feel free to raise your hands if there are, but I do have one final motion, I guess, to make, which is the appointment of the auditors for the next fiscal year. So this was also discussed at the last board meeting. So the motion will be to reappoint Lyle Tilly-Davidson for the upcoming year ending March 31st, 2023. So I'll put the motion forward, and if I could get a seconder on the board, Nola, great, and all in favor. And Deb, are you in favor? Okay, any opposed? Perfect. That's it for me.
Great.
Why have a bad name?
Oh, sure. Anybody else notice that in the pictures that showcased all the board members, that hers is like bright glossy and the rest of us are kind of faded? Anybody else notice that? Is that because it's your final year? Maybe. I'll make a note of that. Pay attention to that. Thank you so much, Laura and to Chelsea, to bringing us up to speed on this past year's financial results. I would now like to, this is where I'm like, I should have taken Linda's direction in terms of, am I doing it? Oh, Dennis. Oh, perfect, Dennis. Good job. So our head of our governance committee, Kathy, she is not here today. She's feeling a bit under the weather. So Dennis, if we can invite you to come up and present the annual governance committee report.
I was hoping I could have introduced myself to Kathy. Not gonna work. Hi, I'm Dennis Young. I'm a member of the governance committee. And if you think accounting and finance is exciting, you should come into some of our meetings. Over the course of the last year, we've been busy carrying out a lot of work regarding our governance, our policies, our bylaws, reviewing approvals related to board committees and the development of codes of conduct and confidentiality agreements and things of that nature. Additionally, an orientation program was developed for new board members, and a board evaluation committee was also developed, both of which will be tools to ensure the stability and effectiveness of our board. Committee also led the evaluation of subsequent contract extension of our executive director and sponsored an organizational compensation review of the management funding. Governance committee has grown over the last year. Now includes board members, myself, Lynn Hartwell, Megan Campbell, and Rose Landry. Jamie is also ex officio to the committee, and Linda also makes her contribution. So work on our plate going forward in terms of policies. We're going to be reviewing organizational risk, cybersecurity, our financial reserves, renewal of board members, and directors and officers insurance. In terms of governance, the role of the board versus the executive director staff, that always needs to be clear and well understood. Board effectiveness programs as required. At some day in the future, executive director succession, although I'm not keen on that. Service Nova Scotia Emergency Shelter Agreement and a cultural survey. So those are the highlights from the governance committee. We spend a lot of time on bylaws. I think that took, I don't know, most of the year. They're very complicated things once you get into the details of them, unless you're a lawyer, and we had a lawyer running that program for us. So that's that committee report, and I'm supposed to be announced the new board members. Okay, so board members for 22-23 includes Jamie, who's a partner with Uprise Consulting, Vice Chair Lynn Hartwell, Vice President of Community College. Treasurer is Nola Sperenberg, did I get that right? Who is incoming treasurer, and Secretary Kathy Gillis, CEO of Property Valuation Services. Members at large include David Boone, Inspector with Halifax Regional Police, Mark Cameron, who's a CPA with Parallel Consulting, Megan Campbell, who's a student at Mount Allison University, Martin Hirschard, who's the QC retired, 50 years of service, Jeremy Jackson, Vice President of Marketing and Sales with Killam Properties, Deborah Page, Director of Marketing and Communications with Develop Nova Scotia, and myself, Founder and Managing Director of Barrington Edge. Officio member Linda Wilson, and a special shout out to our fearless treasurer who is retiring from the board this year. Thank you for your service to the organization. I think that's it. Yeah.
Unless there are any questions? Okay. Kathy, we can't expect you to do it all.
Well, I could. I was Kathy.
Yeah, well, it's true. That's very, very true. All right, well, thank you for stepping in for sure. Would now like to introduce Deborah Page. She's our chair for stakeholder fundraising engagement / everything else, right? Is that how it goes? Yeah, sure. As she presents her annual report from the committee this year. Deborah?
Thank you, Jamie. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for inviting me and allowing me to be here. I am happy and proud to make this report on behalf of the Fundraising and Stakeholder Relations Committee. You know, as the year comes to a close, it was certainly an active year for our committee, and our efforts were focused on obviously dealing with a lot of the issues that continue, you know, with population that we are working to serve, and the societal issues that exist, but also in working to lay a foundation for the organization for the future, and so I think that that has set us well. The committee itself is growing and evolving. 3 additional board members have joined our ranks for the 22-23 fiscal year, and they are eager to help us work towards our committee's purpose, which includes building awareness, support, and commitment of governments and the community at large in order to finance the current operations and future strategic goals of Shelter Nova Scotia. Additionally, the goals and objectives established by the new strategic plan will help to inform and focus the committee's work on a go-forward basis. And I did want to say that the strategic planning process that we were able to participate in, along with a large group of staff, was very, very worthwhile and extremely informative. And so I think it sets us up very well for the future. In terms of changes over this past year, achieving organizational-wide wage parity was perhaps the most impactful for Shelter Nova Scotia and our dedicated employees. Engage funding discussions is always complex, even when that relationship is already well established and strong. With the new provincial government in place this past year, it was critical that we develop a positive rapport as part of those discussions. Not only did we raise our organization's profile with the new government, we were able to come to an agreement on incremental government funding, allowing Shelter Nova Scotia to create wage parity across the organization. Incredibly important to the organization and to the staff, and also incredibly important to be able to continue to provide the services that we provide to our clients. I do want to thank those many folks that we reached out to and asked for advice and help and guidance as we were moving through that process. They all know who they are, for help and the willingness to actually step in with us to help us achieve those objectives. The year, of course, was not without its challenges. We did, as a committee, work with the leadership team to rebuild the organization's fundraising and communications capacity. As part of that, we helped to frame up some fundraising and communications positions, scoping them and providing a framework for finding the right organizations, right individuals for those roles. And despite those staffing challenges, Shelter Nova Scotia was, as you heard through the finance report, able to not only maintain but also exceed historic levels of fundraising, and that provides a great platform for the organization going forward. I think it's important to note that during COVID, the fundraising efforts and results were quite astounding, as the focus of our community was further kind of directed towards the issue that existed, and that certainly was highlighted through COVID. Our goal was to try and maintain as much of that as possible, and we were able to do that. And so I think that was a really great achievement by the organization. Another critical undertaking for our committee, and also why we always have lots of people who volunteer for our committee, because we have fun stuff to do, like beginning the groundwork for our organizational rebrand and establishing a process for that important work to take place moving forward. As we look ahead to 22-23, completing the rebrand and launching the campaign to reintroduce ourselves to the community at large will be one of our committee's key objectives, and we're really looking forward to that. Moving forward, our committee will build upon our stakeholder mapping exercise by completing and socializing the stakeholder engagement strategy among the organization and our supporters and our board members, etc., and partners. And certainly with the hub pilot garnering significant attention and designated donations for the organization, we will continue to support staff with fundraising and awareness building efforts while ensuring close alignment with the transformational Metro Turning Point 2.0 plans as they continue to evolve and take shape. It's easy to get overwhelmed when we are in, when we've lived through the last 2 years that we've all lived through. What's time and space, nobody knows anymore. But I think the one thing that it has done is it has really focused us on the things that are really important. This organization already knew it was doing important work, and the need for it increases. And I think that the word I'd like to leave my comments on is I feel hope and I have hope. So I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has. If not, I will turn it back over to Jamie.
Okay, all the questions I know.
Yeah.
People on there. Oh, all right. So a big thank you to all three committees and members on the committee. I'd now like to, as part of our next step in the agenda, I'd like to introduce Linda Wilson. Wilson. Oh my, it has been a very long day. Linda Wilson for her annual executive director's report. Linda. Although that could be a good nickname. We'll see if it's good.
Afternoon, everybody. I am very pleased to be here. See you all. Thank you for coming. My annual report is in the report, and I'm just going to review it at a very high level. Shelter, Nova Scotia is a very important place, and it does life-changing work every day in all four of our sectors, in corrections, in housing, and shelter, and in the community. And next year, Metro Turning Point, I think people know that Shelter Nova Scotia is the amalgamation of two organizations, Metro Turning Point and St. Leonard's Society. And both those organizations have, I think St. Leonard's Society has been operating over 40 years, and next year, Turning Point will be 50 years. And many people in this room and people before us and people after us have been part of that journey. And as I write these kinds of reports every year, I was thinking about all kinds of things, of course, because you want to say something meaningful. And I was wondering, are circumstances worse today, or do we just know more? And I really don't know. I think about it all the time. Do we just know more, or are things worse? I don't know. But what I do know about this organization is that we have a deep history of struggle and triumph and learning and growth and change and stability and sadness and grief and kindness and strength. And while all that's going on, there's always the desire to do more and to do better. And I am privileged to be moving into my 8th year with this organization, with a committed group of employees governed by an informed board, supported by volunteers, donors, and 3 levels of government. And I think everybody's mentioned we did a new strategic plan this year, and my operational plan is basically my report. It's in your document, but I'm not going to go over that whole thing. I'm just going to give you the very high points of it, and I'd be happy to meet with anybody later to discuss it at greater detail. So in recent years, our shared priority as an organization was to stop and stabilize. That was the language that we were using. And to do that, that included ensuring all 6 buildings that are owned by Shelter Nova Scotia are safe and in good repair and are functioning effectively. It also included grounding the organization in sound financial practice and reliable and appropriate funding. We needed to anchor board governance, membership and strategic planning, and establish a living wage for all employees and strengthen our teams. And we did it. We reached those goals. They're to continue on, but we arrived. So we're ready for something new. Now that our foundation is strong, it's time for a new approach, one that centers on professionalism and value for our employees, development of our board members, and best practice for our clients. And they are the very heart of why we're here. So when I'm finished, following my comments, Melissa Puttycombe, who's our Director of Practice and Development, will present our new practice framework, and you will just see how excellent we really are. So I had 4 strategic focuses coming from the board strategic plan. The first is talent management. We need to have strong and inspired employees. And to do that, we need to increase our investment in leadership, which means establishing a new leadership structure and activities that support the professionalization of our teams and practices. The next strategic focus was financial resources. Again, we're in way better shape than we ever were, but we need to continue to work on our financial stability and growth. As many people have mentioned, there's been a significant improvement in the financial health and stability of the organization, and we need to continue to diversify our funding sources and fortify ourselves so we can offer more wraparound services for the people we serve. The third strategic focus is programs and services, and we have determined our goal is to be recognized as experts in services for people who identify as men. Most people we serve identify as adult males. There are not enough resources and support services for men. Stereotypes regarding why they're in crisis. There's a lack of understanding of their needs, and deep myths about the deserving and the undeserving poor. And with that, that limits the empathy that the public will show for interventions. And those interventions can be life-changing for clients and build stronger communities. Our fourth focus is around our key stakeholders, our profile and our narrative. And Shelter Nova Scotia, we want it to be the place to be, whether it's to work, to volunteer, to be on the board, to donate, or to come for service. Shelter Nova Scotia needs to be professional, highly qualified and experienced staff who are committed to providing the best services possible to our clients every day. And we are 100% ready to do it. One of the ways that we will accomplish this is through our framework for practice that Melissa's been working on, mostly so far with the shelter services team, but it's after it's established there, we'll be moving through to our housing community and correction sectors. So, oh, there she is. Whenever you're ready, Melissa, to come up, before, as you're walking up, though, I would like to say pulling all something like this together today is a lot of hard, tedious work. And I'd like to thank Sandy Thompson, Kylie Harris, and Stacy Dort for everything they did to make this happen today. Ready? That I wear trifocal. I can't walk down the stairs. Maximize it.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see so many people here today. Linda had asked me to speak to our practice framework, which was a bit challenging because the practice framework is an 80-page document that's full of theory and some content that's really difficult to sort of distill in 10 minutes. So I'm going to go very high level in my explanation of what's to come, and I would invite anyone, if they wanted more information or a copy of it, just jot down my email or come up to me after, and I'd be happy to share it with you after the fact. So I just wanted to start with a bit of a snapshot of where we are in Halifax. Right now, according to the Affordable Housing Association of Nova Scotia and the Halifax by Name list, there are 686 people who are identified as actively homeless. So essentially, when I hear Linda say, are things worse? Are they the same? Do we just have more information? What I can say is in 20 years of doing this work, things feel really dire right now. It is very challenging to try to support folks. We do have a housing crisis, and the work is becoming more and more difficult. And I would say the emotional labor is becoming a heavier bag to carry. So in addition to that, what we're seeing is the level of shame that people are internalizing is highly problematic. In addition to the stigma they face by when they try to encounter, whether that be landlords or whatever the situation is, trying to find housing. It's really tricky when there's not a lot of housing available. People don't necessarily want to rent to our particular clients. So I just wanted to share something. I don't know how many of you folks have seen this before. It was circulating online, but this is a photo that someone had taken and they've given us permission to use the photo. But this was something they took on Bears Road in May. So if you can't read it all the way to the back, someone had just written "Hunt the Homeless" on a sign or on this electrical box on a pole in Halifax, which I would imagine for the people in this room, that could be quite jarring to see. And why this is so important is because stigma is very much alive and well. And although we are having a lot more conversations than we've ever had before, and there is more investment than we've ever seen before, there's still a lot of work to do to change the narrative around the people that we support. And what's interesting in this particular situation, and I'll read it because you may not be able to see it, the person who had found that had then taken the time to, I don't know if they carry a Sharpie or how they did that, but they were able to reword the sign to "Hunt homes for the homeless, your neighbors matter." And so I just really wanted to start there to ultimately depict what we're up against in the community. And certainly this does not reflect the attitude of necessarily many, but it does reflect the attitude of some. And so part of our role is really to speak up, to disrupt those stereotypes, and do work for people that are largely not being, there's just not a lot being done, especially as it relates to men who experience homelessness. And they're the largest group of people who are experiencing homelessness, and also the biggest group that we are serving in our programs. So what I thought I would do, this was actually a little bit of a fun little game for me. I went back to the research that I did in April of 2018 when I did my Master of Social Work degree. And actually 4 years ago, I would have come to the annual general meeting and I would have made my recommendations at that time of what I thought we should be doing based on the research. And so what I'm going to do this evening is take you through, I guess, a little bit of a report card on how we're doing and how we've done over the last number of years. So sometimes when it feels like there is a lot of strife and difficulty, we actually do accomplish more than we think sometimes. And only when you stop and go back and look, do you realize how much you've actually achieved. So this was quite uplifting when I kind of went through this exercise. So thanks, Linda, for the suggestion. So I'm going to start with recommendation number 1, which was related to program changes. And I want to contextualize this by saying this relates to the research I did around best practices to support men experiencing homelessness. And I specifically used Metro Turning Point as a case study. So what you're seeing here by and large is reflective of recommendations related to Metro Turning Point. So one of the first recommendations that was made was to incorporate a case coordination framework. And essentially what had happened in real life was during the pandemic, we had an opportunity to further reduce our occupancy at Berry House and Metro Turning Point. And what that looked like essentially is that we got to a place where we had a much more reasonable employee to guest ratio of approximately 1 employee to every 10 guests. So what we had was a lot more availability of time to work with folks in a more intentional and strategic way. So as a result of that, the picture that you see here is a report that Shelter Nova Scotia submitted to our funders, the Department of Community Services, to say, this is how we are going to work differently and more strategically and intentionally with the people that we serve. And the goal of that is to focus on shelter diversion, shorter shelter stays, and to really apply case management practices with an eye towards helping people resolve homelessness and exit as quickly as possible. So this was a recommendation that was made in 2018, and we have actually been able to realize this goal. The second recommendation under program was to create a committee to develop a theoretically informed practice framework. Essentially, interestingly, we were able to realize this work in the last fiscal year. So the information is actually quite current, even though it started a long, long time ago. And essentially what this looks like is we recognized it was important to ground our approaches in theory, in evidence, in essentially anything that sort of took us out of our emotions and that subjectivity, because the work is so challenging and there's a lot of emotions in the work. And while we do want to lean into our compassion, we also think it's really important to be able to professionalize our approaches and how we work with folks. And so with that in mind, we developed a committee of people that was very widely represented. There was about 50 people that worked for us that participated in this project over the course of several years, where we developed a practice framework. So we check. So essentially what you see here is about as detailed as I'm going to get in terms of what the practice framework looks like. And this is an infographic that was developed to really high level take you through the 80-page document. Essentially, what this will tell you is that we recognize the need for a practice framework, which most simply put is just a guiding lens to view our practice. It's meant to align with our organizational vision and mission. Again, also to encourage ethical decision-making and really to encourage self-reflection in our everyday work. So working on our own self-awareness and investing in one another to look at kind of what kind of values and assumptions and biases are we all bringing to the work, because we're all carrying our own suitcases and sometimes we may not even be aware of what's kind of going into our perspectives. So this is a kind of a broad overview, but essentially what we wanted to do was to get into what's most important to us, and what came out resoundingly important based on our interviews with employees was we really need to more proactively and meaningfully engage folks with lived and living experiences. So talking to people who have experienced homelessness, who continue to experience homelessness, learn from their perspective, incorporate that perspective in a meaningful way. So not in a tokenistic way, but in a way that says, for example, if we were to look forward and say, we want to do Metro Turning Point 2.0, well, on the front end, what does that look like for the people that we serve? And what do they suggest that we do? And what is helpful to them and responsive to their needs, as opposed to making assumptions that we think we know what is best for someone else. So I guess the other part of that piece is to recognize that we position people as, or rather we use the perspective that people are experts in their own lives. And I think what's most, from my view, what's most beneficial with the practice framework is that it's meant to offer a context or philosophy about how we want folks to think when they come into this organization. So for the first time, we have something that people can refer to when they're new and they're onboarding to say, here's how we want you to approach the work that you do here. And here are some of the theories and the practice models we want you to look through and to become more acquainted with, so you have an idea of how we want you to essentially interact with the folks that we serve through an eye of really dignity and respect and compassion and professionalism. The other sort of overarching, if you see in the umbrella up there, is it all blue to you folks? So you probably don't have a whole lot of color, but the other big, umbrella piece is around cultural humility. And what I can say is we were very careful to not use the term cultural competence, because we had a recognition that you cannot be competent in someone else's culture. And so the idea here is this idea of approaching things as a learner and being really inviting and open to learning about the experiences of others and working across difference in a way that is inviting, and really trying to lean into those conversations, even if it gets uncomfortable, and recognize that we've got a lot to learn about one another and how do we do that most effectively. So that's something historically I can say we haven't really done a very good job of, but we hope to improve that as we move forward. I'm not going to get into the theories or the practice models specifically. Like I said, you're more than welcome to reach out if you'd like to see the document. But suffice it to say, there were some subcommittees. There was a bunch of work done to identify. Here's a list of what could be applicable theories. Here's a list of what could be applicable practice models. Here are some different ways we can practice ethical decision making. And we, through a series of work that happened over longer than a year, we were able to distill it down into a shorter list, because ultimately you can only look through so many lenses at once. The other big piece of this is, so there's the philosophy half of the document, but then there's also a very practical side to the document that essentially gives really like tangible markers for people to say, this is what day and this is what time we are going to work with folks around things like getting the document ready, helping them move toward exiting shelter, and really emphasizing a shorter shelter stay, because where now we have a greater ratio of employees to guests, we changed our model to say every employee has now got a caseload. So instead of us, potentially seeing people slip through the cracks, every guest is connected to someone. So there will be someone to check in with that person at least every week to continue to have conversations about housing. And even where there isn't a lot of housing available, to really promote the idea that we're still here to talk about it. And it's important to reflect hope with one another, because if people start to see us in despair without hope, it's really easy to become demotivated. So we want to make sure that we're emphasizing hope and just continue to try to work toward it, because the vacancies that come up are few and far between, but they do happen and people are moving. So we just want to recognize that. And I guess ultimately to recognize that before this document was ever created, we had some cultural priorities, and that's also informing the work. So this idea around being strength-based, we don't view people as, essentially the fault of their own issues. We recognize the systemic barriers that happen that kind of put people in our path. The 4 agreements, a self-reflection tool, support and challenge, a way to interact with one another that invests in one another and our growth, and the 16 core competencies, of which one gratitude is. I took notes and I haven't read them at all. You've heard a lot about this tonight. So one of the recommendations in 2018 was to incorporate an aftercare service for former guests to remain connected and to promote eviction prevention. So what was happening in real life is that people would stay at the shelter, they would leave, and then they'd want to come back and connect with us, and we couldn't support them anymore. And that actually was a decision that was made based on a survey of our guests at the time to say, do you want us to have a drop-in? Do you not want us to have a drop-in? And the guests told us that they didn't want to drop in anymore. So we piloted it at Metro Turning Point, and we decided to stop it at their suggestion. So that's an example of us enacting the inclusion of folks with lived and living experience. But what it turned into at the same time was there's just no ongoing relationship. And for some folks, we were all people had to hang on to. So we recognized the importance of some kind of a drop-in space where people could come and be, because what was showing up resoundingly in the research was that social inclusion is incredibly important and often underestimated. So this idea that if you don't have connection and belonging, you just cannot survive and thrive. You really need to have some, we really need to have some kind of a connect. And so we also achieve that, which is pretty cool. So here's a picture of Housing Hub, and the housing team is here tonight. So big shout out there as well for all the work that's gone on in the last year. The hub opened in November, and I don't know if Julie will mind me telling the story, but Julie made a bunch of sandwiches the very first day, and then nobody came. And Julie was devastated about making these sandwiches, and nobody showed up. And so I had gone back to Linda and I said, Linda, Julie's really feeling the weight of like nobody came for those sandwiches. And Linda said, well, the same thing happened at Phoenix when they opened their drop-in center. And I said, well, you should please tell Julie that story. Anyhow, it was not very long, and all of a sudden we're at a place where Julie's saying, we need a bigger space. Like I cannot keep up with the number of people coming here. They're lining up down the street. And it's bittersweet in many ways, because in some ways it's nice to see that people feel comfortable enough to come to the hub and to build that relationship with the folks that are here tonight. And on the other side, it's also sad to see that so many people are coming to that type of a service. But ultimately, we're there to provide basic needs support. So that's access to showers, food, laundry. We're there to provide by appointment supports around housing readiness. So, coming in to meet with someone about getting getting some paperwork completed or applications completed. And I would say that we're continuing to support folks that were previously staying at Metro Turning Point through a sort of a caseload. And what we're here to do is to really learn, what are people telling us? What do people need? What are the unmet needs? And how can we use that learning to, I guess, propel that into what we hope to become Metro Turning Point 2.0. So thanks to some folks in the room, we're getting better at statistics. And so what we know now is in August, we supported 203 different people. So that was 127 different people supported at drop-in. And of those, 64% are male identified. In addition to those folks, we've got 76 people on the regular caseload that we're supporting, plus on top of that, 151 diversion supports. So we got 48 requests for financial help, and we approved 29 of those. So most requests have been approved, and we're continuing to tweak the eligibility criteria. And just for interest, in August, the hub spent $26,000 in diversion support, which is mostly around eviction prevention. So the demand is incredibly high, which is causing us to assess and reassess who we're supporting and under what circumstances, because the amount of referrals we're getting is really quite astounding. Like the referrals are coming in from emergency, 211, health, you name it, it's coming in, and it's coming in fast and furious, and we're struggling to even keep our mailboxes from being full. So lots to do, lots to learn, and we're just continuing to try to learn as we go and ask questions and ask people what things like, what's bringing you back here, like what brings you back. The last recommendation that was made based on programming was to address the health issues of the population. And I've given that an in progress. One thing I can note is that through the partnerships, the hub has now got MOSH, which is the Mobile Outreach Street Health Team, coming once a week to park their van outside of the hub. And in August, we saw 27 people were supported that way. So we know there are many health needs of the people we support. We know there are a lot of people identifying an inability to access mental health and addictions in a timely fashion. But we've got a lot of work to do in this regard, I would say. So this is what I would describe as in progress, and we've got more to do. The second recommendation of the three was around employees. So one of the things that was noted at the time was to essentially carve out roles for folks so they could be specialized, and essentially to increase competence and accountability. And so what we've done is we have implemented the position of social worker in our facilities, specifically the shelters. And those folks over the last year have been asked to really take over the case management approach, which has changed how we work. And it's also taken some responsibility away from our house manager, so people can lean into their jobs more specifically. And we hope that with that specialization in guest practice, that folks are really building capacity and there's more knowledge transfer happening. And as I've mentioned, now every employee has a caseload. So we recognize that we have, for the first time, have been able to successfully ensure that each person has someone attached to them. And that's something that we've been able to do in the last year as a result of the change in our staff ratio. So check. And then the next recommendation that was made at the time was to create a human resource plan to address burnout. So through the practice framework, we have created space in the shelter sector for employees to meet regularly with a social worker or supervisor, so we can go through some critical reflection and unpack the heaviness and the realities of the work. And you'll notice in the annual report, more broadly across the entire organization, we've also been able to implement sharing circles with a trained grief counselor so that we're able to connect with folks more regularly as things happen, and also preventatively to really emphasize and prioritize the importance of our individual wellness and the wellness of one another. And that's really as an effort to mitigate some of that compassion fatigue that is inherent in the work. And I think, as someone has said, you can't walk through water and expect not to get wet. And you can't do this work without expecting to be impacted in some way by trauma and compassion fatigue. The final recommendation was related to physical space. So the first one had been made at the time to reduce the numbers to the original use of the building, which would have been 50 to 55. And as a result of COVID, we were actually able to reduce our numbers to 30 at Metro Turning Point. And this is just a copy of a picture of the snugs that were built, which we've gotten nothing but positive feedback from the guests themselves about the increase to their health and wellness and safety as a result of having more privacy or semi-privacy than previously when we had a room full of bunk beds. So that's been really, really positive and reported from guests themselves as impacting their mental health in a positive way. And the other recommendation was to pursue alternative space. And I have rated that as an in progress because ultimately what I see is this is connected to Metro Turning Point 2.0 as well, which we now have an opportunity to pursue more as a result of the Cogswell Interchange project. And you've seen this concept design rotating through the PowerPoint all evening. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to move forward and achieve this goal. So that's just sort of an overall summary. What I want to do now is to invite you to watch a video, which I'm hoping won't be any issue to get going, because I think we had some technical difficulty earlier. The video is to highlight the work that we're doing across several of our facilities. The Skyline group of companies, they acquire, develop, and manage real estate properties, and they're fundraising nationally and dividing the proceeds among 5 organizations. And we are the Eastern group that they chose, thanks to the suggestion of Jeremy Jackson. Thank you, Jeremy. They plan to make a substantial financial donation, and they also create videos for each recipient organization to use. And with a focus of being an employer of choice, we requested that our video highlight our employees to further the idea that our service quality depends on our employees' motivation and grounding. So just bear with me, we can take a look.
Shelter Nova Scotia is here to support folks who are, marginalized and who are kind of turned away from every other door. Oftentimes we're the last place people can access and the place that people can go to find, just be and be who they are and be accepted kind of where they're at. Oftentimes folks who are accessing our services are turned away from every other space in the community. And so we really try and provide space for those who can't go anywhere else.
There's many issues that arise day to day in our line of work. Obviously, the housing market is very challenging right now. Overdoses in the city are alarmingly high. We're not only trying to juggle, the best service we can for our guests, but the best service for us so that we can be at our best.
I came into this job because I wanted to help people. Just being able to help someone in some way, kind of get their life back on track, or help them reset, or just, help in any way we can. I mean, it's a great feeling.
Some of the problems we face really are like lack of access to affordable housing, safe housing, the stigma, I think, systemic racism, all of these things that exist. All of these things kind of make it challenging for the folks we support. The Hub is Shelter Nova Scotia's newest project. It's such a unique space where people really encourage each other and support each other. In those times, we provide folks with access to basic needs, food, shower, laundry, access to a computer, housing support, all those kinds of things. Doctors, when we have access to that, And so really the need has grown exponentially. We've outgrown the space that we have in mere months. Sometimes people forget that, you know, folks experiencing homelessness are also human. You know, it just, we might have had different walks of life. They might not have a home, but like we're all just human beings looking for connection and looking for like a place to belong.
You know, I've had friends or family members being like, aren't you scared where you're working? Or, you know, be careful. And that's because they just don't know. Everyone's a person. Everyone deserves to be treated as such or treated, you know, as an equal just because of their background or their experiences or what they're experiencing right now doesn't make them any less of a person than anyone else.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm always inspired when I have the opportunity to think about and reflect just what good things that we're doing in this very challenging time. So we're very close to the end, but it's one of the most important parts. And that's when we recognize people for their contributions. At the same time, we're going to do board and employee service recognition. So I'd ask Jamie and Tammy. I think we're going to do it from over there, looks like. All right.
It's off the side of the podium.
Huh?
It's off the side of the podium.
Just off the side of the podium. Okay. Strong. We're doing it over here. Sorry, I didn't. Yeah, well, we need it over there, but that's good. Okay. Jamie.
Okay, I would, on behalf of the board, we have one member that is leaving us this year, Chelsea. Seems like only yesterday that we joined the board at the same time. For some reason you haven't aged, and I feel I have. But here we are, 5-6 years later. I know you're gonna go on to do great and wonderful things. You have been a steady rock. She's not, who tends to talk a lot, but when she does speak, you listen. So I appreciate that in you. Recently got married, post pandemic, I guess. Taking on a new job, new responsibilities, and a new home. But we want you to know that within Shelter Nova Scotia, you always have a home here with us. And we want to thank you for all your service for the last few years. So thank you so much, Chelsea. You have to jump on the stage. Oh, no, you're bumming me. Okay. All right. Thank you for everything. Yeah.
So in a few moments, we will celebrate some years of service. However, I do need to give a brief report for HR. So last year, as I closed my report, I was very hopeful that COVID wouldn't find its way into this report. However, here we are again. We're still pivoting and adjusting to the new world and our ways beyond COVID. Our teams have risen to every challenge and they've served our clients with strength and courage, providing dignity and respect at every turn. With burnout higher than ever and our wages less than competitive, we were again struggling to maintain an adequate base of qualified employees. Over the summer, as referenced in Deb's report, Shelter Nova Scotia worked tirelessly to present informed, accurate requests for increased funding for wages for our employees. These requests were well received, and many people worked very diligently to make it a reality. As a result of this gigantic effort, in October of 2021, we were able to increase wages for our employees to be in line with the living wage at that time in Halifax. It has since gone up. This was an amazing thing to be a part of, and a heartfelt thank you to our funders who worked so hard to make this happen. the Department of Community Services, Correctional Service of Canada, and Reaching Home, administered by the Affordable Housing Association of Nova Scotia. All those individuals worked very, very hard to make that happen for our organization and our employees. That increase in compensation has definitely helped with our recruitment and retention. However, now we've joined the ranks of every other employer in Canada, I believe, and we're not exempt from having trouble finding people to work. I'm not sure where everyone has gone after COVID, but they're not here. So it is a bit challenging to find that. We have different challenges now, so we'll take that one on as well. Our student experience hasn't quite bounced back to full capacity yet. We did have a social work student complete their placement with us, and we've had students from the human services programs at NSCC do their student placements with us, and we had students from Dalhousie, St. Mary's, and Acadia in the cooperative education program supported through the Department of Labor and Advanced Education. They've all done 4-month work terms with us, and it's been a great experience for all involved. We've also had the unique opportunity to have students from the Industrial Engineering Technology program at NSCC do placements with our organization. Not a match that you would think of off the top of your head. However, they've gone a little bit more technical with us, and our last placement was 2 young individuals who helped us for a few months, and they created an inventory tracking and management system for all of our IT equipment, because during COVID, we ended up purchasing a lot of computers and microphones and headsets and webcams and things like that for people to be able to pivot and do the work at home. And these individuals used their technological backgrounds and engineering experience to create a tracking system complete with barcodes and scanners to keep track of our inventory, and also to be able to green that inventory and do a planned replacement of our computers and things. So that was a wonderful experience, something that we wouldn't have been able to do without the partnership of NSCC. So that is something that we were very fortunate to do. And we're excited, hopefully, to start getting more students, because students are a breath of fresh air. They bring a great perspective, and we're always grateful to have them as part of our team. So we are going to recognize the years of service milestones for some of our employees. I'd like to take just a second, though, and have everyone join me in celebrating something a little bit different. So Amy Leslie, our Director of Shelter Services, is celebrating her birthday today, and here she is. Happy birthday, Amy. Thank you for sharing your birthday with us. We appreciate you each and every day, but especially today. So over the past year, I've seen our employees consistently show up, do the hard work, and make a difference every single day. In HR, we talk a lot about employees being the biggest asset of a company or an organization, human capital, a dollar figure, a price tag, a value. And then you hear stories like the one contained on the very last page of the annual report. And it's about the employees finishing a puzzle that a client was working on when he passed away. It's a silent, powerful tribute. And we can't put a price on that human connection. And I'm humbled to be around people who care enough to make that connection, and grateful to be a small part of that. So thank you to all of our employees. So the slideshow, I'm thinking, is ready to go. Am I advancing it? I can do it. It's fine. So we have several employees who are not able to make it today. We still recognize them with we have affectionately dubbed Wordles or word clouds. It's a compilation of words that the employees' colleagues and others have put together that accurately describe the person. So for people who are celebrating their milestones, we ask their friends and colleagues to come up with words. So Kaylee Kingsbury is celebrating 3 years, has celebrated 3 years with Shelter Nova Scotia. She's since moved on from Shelter Nova Scotia. We'll make sure that she gets her Wordle. But Kaylee was working at Berry House and most recently at the Hub as well. So 3 years for Kaylee. Brianne Perrier is celebrating 3 years as well. caseworker at Neely House and now a client support worker at Neely House. She's also celebrating her 3 years of service. Stephanie Gilroy. Stephanie is a support worker at Metro Turning Point, or support assistant rather at Metro Turning Point. No, support worker, sorry, my apologies. She's been at Metro Turning Point for her 3 years, and she's not able to be here today either, so we'll make sure that she gets that. We do have Caitlin with us today. Can come up. Caitlin is celebrating 3 years of service with us as well. She has worked at many, many facilities throughout the organization. I tried to keep track, but I kind of lost track. And most recently, she has joined the hub as a diversion worker full-time at the housing hub. So congratulations. So Karen Nemhard is a casual at Berry House. I think Karen is just actually leaving Berry House soon, but we'll make sure that she gets her certificate as her wordle as well. So celebrating 5 years of service with Shelter Nova Scotia, we have Shannon Johnson. Our trustee at Mentor Turning Point. So Shannon makes a difference every single day with the trustee program. So thank you, Shannon. It's a pleasure to work with you. Thank you. Thank you. Helena King here is at worked at many different facilities. Most recently returned to Heron Cove Road. So she's working as a casual there. I think Helena's joining us online. I'm not sure, but we'll make sure that she gets her wordle at Heron Cove. So Renee Poitras is a casual at Metro Turning Point. Renee was supposed to be here this afternoon, but ended up not being able to come last minute. And I have it on good authority that wordles are one of her very favorite things. So I'm certain that she's going to be quite excited to get her wordle at Metro Turning Point. So Freya Kaiser Derek is a casual at Metro Turning Point, and she celebrated 5 years with us. So casuals are celebrating 5 years, like that's great. Sarah Hendel, she's also a casual at Metro Turning Point, and I don't know if hers show, yeah, hockey and lawyer shows up on her wordle a lot. So I think she might be either she really likes hockey or she doesn't like hockey. Not sure which way that went, but I do know that she is studying to be a lawyer. So this her work at Metro Turning Point will, I think, play into her role as a lawyer too. So hopefully. So also celebrating 5 years is Carrie Johnson. Carrie's a case manager at Heron Cove Apartments. So we're happy to have Carrie with us, and I believe she may be joining virtually as she's working the back shift tonight. So Cassandra Crick is a casual at Berry House. She's been with us 5 years as well. So we'll make sure that Cassandra gets her wordle at Berry House. Next one is 10 years. So we have 10 years of service from someone who retired unsuccessfully. Sandy Thompson. Sandy's worked at many facilities throughout the organization and tried to retire. It didn't work. Yeah, she came back to help out during COVID. She had retired prior to COVID and came back to help out during COVID, and has now joined the central office team, supporting the executive team. So. Thank you, Sandy.
Oh, this is a very important one. Next one's Tammy.
No, 15 years, feels like 20. 15 years. Director of HR. Not an easy job, probably the calmest person I've ever met.
And people I know can take a look at things they had to say about Tammy. It was really, 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 thank you for everything. Thank you.
Being a part of everything that everyone else does makes it not easy, but makes it easier. We have a couple of 20-year. Michelle Wheeler. Michelle's the house manager at Metro Turning Point. Michelle's had several different positions over the years of the organization, and we're not going to go through those, but she's been the house manager at Metro Turning Point for
Since 2009, but.
yeah. So see, she's been Metro Turning Point, rebuilding Metro Turning Point. So, thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. We also have a 20 years of service for Gina Wilson. The director of housing, and she's had a few different positions throughout the organization. She's worked at Neely House, I believe, and in the supportive housing and Herring Cove and the rebuilding, Turning Point, Neely, Fleming. Everybody did. Gina. Thank you, everyone, and move right along. I'm not sure who's supposed to. But
Thank you, Tammy, and thank you and congratulations to everybody who received service awards. The employees are our tools. That's the most important part of the organization. If we didn't have good employees, nobody would want our service. And I don't think that can be underestimated, that people are attracted to Shelter Nova Scotia for service for a large part because they know our employees want to be there. Thank you for that. I'll ask Jamie to come back now for some closing remarks and also for the door prize draw, which I don't know where the said it. Oh, okay. You guys can.
No, I don't think so. All right. Well, big thank you to everyone for coming here this afternoon. Now we're moving into the evening, right? So just thank you for coming today. I wanted to make sure this is fair. Jeremy wants to be handed. Caitlin Shuri. Or Curry. No. All right, so just a big thank you to everybody for coming today. We would invite you all to please join us for a reception just outside in the back here. So a big thank you. And lastly, I'd like to close it out by, what did I say? The phone say something? Sing? Is that what I'm supposed to do? No, nobody wants that. This meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you. And that's all. Oh, you know what? I just looked and I was curious. There was no name on it.